So I guess I'm just going to address one of these cameras and just be like,
Okay.
welcome to the Mystic Americana Podcast. My name is Kevin, Kevbo, if you will.
I'm Adam.
Here we have my homie Adam. Longtime friends, both, is it safe to say, like, self-identified spiritual seekers?
Yeah, sure.
Both potentially self-identified spiritual seekers. So we've set out on a quest to have a conversation about spirituality in a sense, but in a new light, in a new lens. So you can probably tell from the title of the podcast, it's called the Mystic Americana Podcast. So I figure a good place to start is like break that down. What does that even mean to us, you know? So I don't know if you want to start, or I guess I should jump in. Just pulling up my notes here casually. But to me, I mean, unless you want to dive in?
Go for it.
Yeah, I don't know. So let's start. The word mystic, obviously there's a spiritual implication here. So the mystic is having some visible, active relationship with some unseen force, some spiritual, invisible layer that underpins, perhaps causes, you know, what we experience as reality. So it kind of represents the next subtle layer behind the veil, so to speak.
To me, it's engaging with the thing that is mysterious.
Okay.
At any point.
I like that. Mysterious is a strong word. I've been thinking about that word mysterious lately. Mm-hmm. Because it has such a deep implication, and a lot of times when things are left mysterious, they're given this gravity that being literal and being too on the nose and explaining something doesn't allow. And it's almost like creation kind of has the same approach, where like having that element of mystery is essential to the function somehow.
Absolutely. I think if there's not another layer of something to discover, then you've got it figured out.
Right, then what's left?
So to me, the mystic or the mystical is the thing that is engaged in the layers and peeling away the layers and finding out, or seeking to find out is a better way to phrase it, what the truth is. Where, you know, the ultimate level has no mystery involved. It has nothing that's hidden. So between here and there,
that's the mystic.
Yes. Essentially.
But I believe with the acknowledgement of the principles that lie within that range, and through that acknowledgement, sort of embodying those principles and integrating them into our world, then it's like the unseen is being seen, and then the mystic takes root and comes to life, and it's a whole new application of the word mystic, because a lot of times we're referring to something that's mystical. And so it's really about the application. It's like the spiritual level's always there, but to what degree can we apply that determines how spiritual or mystic that we are, or a situation is, or reality can be, whatever that means.
Right. And I think that it's applied through methods that actively engage in peeling away the layers.
Mm-hmm. That's what spiritual practice is that which removes those obscuring layers, let's say.
Yes. Or engages with it directly.
And the obscuring...
To where there's always a wall.
Yeah, okay.
As you go through it.
There's always got to be the next mystery.
Yes.
Okay, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, because it's the way I was wording it, it was more like the act of the spiritual practice is about the removing process, but really it's about relating to the truth, and then what's removed, the illusions that are dispelled, and however you want to describe that, is just the byproduct of actually relating to the truth and not the other way around.
I like that phrasing a lot.
Theoretically. I mean, that's the idea of yoga, right? Yoga means union with the divine, supposedly, or some interpretation of a phrase like that. And so it's not about getting over your karmas or psychological conflictions. It's about relating to the truth and uniting with the truth. And then that's what causes all of whatever benefits you see from yoga and all its various practices.
Right. And the Yoga Sutras clearly lay that out as here is a system that is how a practitioner engages with the process of coming into yoga.
Yeah, it's like we all think that we're coming to this for the first time and the process of awakening feels so unique to us, but really there's these benchmark turning points that have been laid out for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a textbook happening where, a lot of times in my experiences with spiritual teachers, I think I'm having a unique experience, but when I compare notes with you sometimes or a lot of other friends on the spiritual path, sometimes it's like we've had parallel, if not the exact same visions from the same teachers. And it's like, it's not that we think we're coming to this thing uniquely and that it's like, oh, I found the grail, but really it's just there.
Right.
And real masters can show you almost like on command, it seems like.
Yes.
It's pretty wild. I mean, it's like one time I had an experience and then read a pamphlet at the end of the meditation retreat that was written like 15 years earlier, and someone wrote out the exact same fucking thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it blew my mind, and it still blows my mind, but I guess I shouldn't be so wowed by it, because it's like, the truth is constant and we're in the fluctuating part.
Right,
so.
right. The experience seems individual, but the conclusion is always the same. The ending of the story is always the same.
That's how it seems to me, Religions wouldn't agree, but I think if it was all written in the same language model, that they could see that actually they're all speaking about the same ultimate truth, and unfortunately just describing it in different ways so that it seems different.
Yeah.
It's hard to even use words like God properly because everyone has such a different association with it that it's easy to misconstrue the meaning, and it's almost frustrating now where if only people knew, like, saying the word Allah or Allah, however you properly pronounce it, saying the word God, it's not a different word. It's the same word in a different language model. It's referring to the same thing. It's not even like, well, God is this version of it and Allah is this version of it. It's like they're both pointing to the same thing and just calling it a different word. They're not even, but it's easy from the outside to think they're pointing to different identifications of what God is. And I think that's where the problem, a lot of problems and tensions between religions really starts.
Absolutely. And I just want to say real quick that we are incredibly fortunate to live in a country that allows for discussions like this, and for you to be able to make a statement like that you just made.
Well, maybe it's too bold of a statement, but that's just my personal opinion. I mean, don't hold me on a cross to it or anything per se, but yeah, it seems like the truth is the truth, and we're all in the same reality, and so whatever the truth of this reality is, it has to be the same truth, whether you're calling it a name of a being, a deity, or some abstract principle of a God principle. These are all just interpretations, but whatever that ultimate layer is, it has to be the same. Like, we're not in different universes. We're all on the same planet here. We're all relating to the same illusion or the same limited version of reality, or however you want to say it, in my opinion. But that's kind of what's been motivating this podcast's existence in the first place, is I feel like all of the spiritual conversations have become so just disjointed. It's like no one's trying to really say, hey, what if we were all saying the same thing?
Yeah.
What does that conversation even look like?
Right.
I'm not sure that conversation is happening. People are still having debates, this versus that, this or that. And it's not to the point where it's like, okay, well, what if it all was complementary insight on the same truth, and we put it all together and we extract all the wisdom from all of it together at once and become the ultimate human beings that have received the most wisdom from all the prophets and all the wisdom traditions cumulatively, and not still stay in this petty mode where it's like, I don't even want to look into the wisdom of Islam because I was raised Christian or some shit. Or, vice versa, or whatever. I mean, obviously it's easy to pin one or the other. I don't mean to say one group does that more than the other. I see that a lot in Buddhist groups and yoga, Hindu adjacent groups, and it's everywhere. It's just about the individual, in my opinion, when it comes to, you can't define a whole religion as they see it this way or they see it that way. There's people in every religion that see the unified truth and understand what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. And I meet those kind of people all the time. And it's like from all walks of life. I can't say that there's one path that works better than another in that sense even.
Right. Everyone thinks they're right and everyone wants to be right. And what I like about mysticism is it leaves room to be wrong. And if it doesn't leave room to be wrong, then it's not mysticism, it's religion.
Wow. Yeah, exactly. Because inherently with that word mystery you were talking about earlier, it's like it's a gap.
Yes.
There has to be that gap.
Yes.
So if you have it all figured out, then you don't have it figured out.
Correct.
Within this approach of like, even the word spiritual is very concrete compared to this word mystic.
Yes.
Because the word spiritual in a sense is more of like the implying that you've applied your connection to spirit in some way. So it implies like being spiritual in my interpretation of it. You can't have spirituality without someone being spiritual. And it's just this very active verb-like approach where it just literalizes in a different way than the idea of a mystic, which is very cerebral and conceptual. And it's like, its spirituality is ingrained in the nature. It's not something you achieve or something you can earn, but it's like understanding that there is this invisible state that's already there.
Yes, I think the way that spirituality is used as a word in our culture today means that the individual that's claiming to be spiritual is just religious, and they've claimed
it's a new
their own belief
subgenre of religion, basically. Right. It's like, I'm religious, but not one of the main five.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
I hate to see it, and I hate to say it, but that's what it seems like. And I feel like that's kind of the impetus for this conversation. I know we're still kind of riffing on what is mystic. We haven't even got to the Americana part of the title yet. Mm-hmm. But I think that's really what's charged me to want to have this conversation with you specifically, because I feel like we both have related to spiritual culture in such a way where we've been kind of let down by it. I don't want to speak for you, but I will say for myself, like this literalization of spirituality applied to culture and put in the context of people at different yoga studios, meditation retreats, people of all religions, you name it, anyone who's identified as spiritual, it kind of becomes like a badge you wear, and it becomes like a uniform, an outfit, a vibe. I know here I am wearing a kurta, an Indian style shirt, and saying this.
Looks great on you.
But I appreciate it. But I mean, it's like, it's more than just the shirt, it's a vibe. And I feel like the vibe has been lost in the culture. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to wear a shirt, and it's a lot harder to have this active relationship with mysticism in a way that makes you radiate whatever that spiritual essence is. Mm-hmm. And you can't just, in my opinion, you can't just sign up for a class or do a practice and declare yourself as spiritual. And it's really just like, it's really the vibe you carry, and it's just the feeling that you bring into the world, but also the perception, and keeping that line of awareness open where you are sort of subconsciously or consciously connected to that mystery level. Mm-hmm. Which then informs how you relate to the moment. And that's what I feel like being spiritual isn't acting like, oh, I'm going to talk softly and be more calm and gentle than I really am. But it's like the gentleness that people are identifying with and trying to emulate is just a reflection of being connected to that spiritual level, which keeps you kind of half in and half out of this world in some regard, even if you're fully present and fully active and fully zen in the moment.
Right.
I think that's what Jesus was implying with be in the world, but not of the world, where it's like, just keep that line open to God. And that will kind of mitigate how attached you are to the world each moment.
Yes.
And how focused you are on your goals and worked up you are about your sense of this or that, because that's what kind of distorts being spiritual, being in the present moment, and having that mystical consciousness or experience, in my opinion. So, in a sense, like, I don't want to make this podcast just to critique every aspect of spiritual culture and say this is how this person's doing it wrong and this is how this scene's doing it wrong. But instead, I was hoping to use this as a platform to appreciate and to celebrate like avenues and beings and communities and situations where people have taken this mystic torch and have authentically held it and carried it and knocked the ball out of the park and have kept the vibe alive in ways that are obviously connected to spiritual culture, but also in ways that are just not overtly viewed as this is spiritual.
Yes, a true mystic, to me, should not be bound by culture. They engage with truth and live in truth as far as they can understand it at any given time. And culture does, in my opinion, the exact opposite. It limits truth. It says, this is what's normal, and this is what's not normal.
Right. What does Terence McKenna say? He's like, culture is...
not your friend.
It's not your friend, but it's also something about like
yeah.
some computer metaphor. I forget about it. Like,
I don't know that one.
Yeah, I don't know about updating the software or something. I forget the whole metaphor, but I get it. I mean, in a sense, spirituality is defying culture, but I'm also fascinated at the intersection of those two principles, and like that's kind of what I feel like is motivating a lot of what I want to talk about on this podcast and in the future of podcasts like this, where it's like, here's someone who used the illusion of culture, took this framework that's based on human identification and limited consciousness and worldly activity, and then actually kind of elevate that and use it as a way to kind of give people a glimpse of something bigger and more spiritual within something that doesn't seem spiritual inherently, whether that's like a genre of music that you don't think is spiritual, or maybe like movies in general or non-spiritual movies are inherently bad or negative to some people. But like a lot of times when you go into the deepest, darkest films, they show you some of the most brilliant, bright, divine things, and even like the intersection of the whole culture being obsessed with like monsters and demons and creatures and stuff. Well, that's on the verge of talking about different dimensions, and that opens up the conversation. If there's demons, what if there's angels, and what if there's bodhisattvas too? And it kind of is opening the mystic, even when it's not addressing something that's positive or spiritual, right?
Right. I mean, look what Jesus did with Judaism, just in terms of what you can eat. So all of a sudden he's like, if you're starving, go ahead and eat pork.
Wow. Okay.
Sure, it's not kosher, but it's also not okay to starve to death.
Right. That's a good point.
You know?
Man. Absolutely. It's
go ahead and eat.
No, I mean, in a sense, Jesus already made the Mystic Americana podcast, because I think his whole thing about the new covenant is basically what we're talking about, kind of, right? I don't know enough to speak with authority, but it seems like the new covenant is kind of like an agreement that's like, just love God and be kind to your neighbor, and then that's what spirituality is. Everything else will work out. You don't need religion. You don't need the high holidays and all the rituals. Maybe I'm over implicating for what he was saying, but I feel like that's what the new covenant was saying, and it was all just about like embodying this mysticism in your own way. And that's really what the message of Jesus was. Like, not even be a Christian as much as like, because there wasn't even such thing as a religion of Christianity at the time. It was just be your own mystic.
Right. Do to everything around you that God has done for you.
That's quite a bill to pay.
It's a big bill.
All of creation.
And, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, so there's the mystic side of it, and then there's the Americana side of it. And so I feel like, America, despite what people may think, is a pretty new cultural phenomenon compared to world history, right? Like, everything that's happening in American history and the culture that's been derived within it is all very fresh. And so it's easy to look at ancient cultures and religions, or even, middle-aged cultures and religions, and like have this sense of awe and wonderment and just get lost in their mystic traditions in a way that I don't think has been possible for a lot of Americans. I feel like our culture is is very unspiritual right now as a whole and mainstream, and it's kind of degraded away from spirituality in a sense where it's like we don't have this pillar or to look towards. We don't have this long history of mystic traditions that are unique to our culture that we can stand on as things are starting to shift in different ideologies and political parties, and things are moving and shaking around the world. Okay, well there is no foundation, and in fact America was built in a beautiful way around accepting all religions in the first place, and so it's even harder to pin down what is the soul of America, like what is the mystic essence of American culture. And so I feel like there's a tremendous value to investigating all of the instances where spirituality and American culture have already intersected, so we can lift that up and kind of help reinforce that, no, we actually do have a history of mysticism in America, a deep history, but it's just such a new country that it's not like the same as going to ancient Buddhist temples or going to the Vatican or something,
It is, because when Europeans moved here, what they did is they wiped out all the mystics that were living here.
That's very true, dude.
I don't quote me on this, but something I read a while ago said that the Cherokee claimed to be over 100,000 years old.
Wow. I think I've read that as well. And I don't know about the numbers, but I think I read there was also, was it millions? There was at least 100,000 natives that were, I forget the numbers, but it's like, it seems like there was a lot more people living here than some history books have indicated.
I'm pretty sure 100 million people were wiped out.
Wow.
Again, don't quote me on it. So now what we have is this
sorry, forgive me. Continue.
Eurocentric approach to our country, and I'm losing my thought.
I'm sorry, I distracted
there. No,
okay.
That's okay.
But yeah, so we have to sort of claim and redefine, draw from shallower pools in a sense. Where
exactly.
There were all of these shamans that have been here, all of these native mystics that were both using sacrament and not, that were very high spiritual beings. Maybe it was a whole culture of high spiritual beings. We don't fully know how deep it goes. They could have been on a different plane of consciousness for all I know, But whatever it is, now we've replaced them with this very material culture here,
Exactly.
And it seems like, obviously I have a skewed perception because I was born and raised in America, but it seems like a lot of the world trends of culture, especially in the last 50 years, are derived from American trends or derivatives of trends that Americans adopted and then exploited and became national phenomenons in terms of movie culture, TV culture, what's popular in music, what's happening culturally. It seems like, this is kind of an epicenter for some reason. We have some karma. Maybe it has to do with the timing of technology and the radio and the television, and just when people were dispersing creativity from where at what pivotal times. I'm not saying that America is in any way special because they might hold this throne or crown right now, but it does seem like all the popular trends in culture worldwide as a whole, overgeneralizing, but it seems like, America has had this huge influence culturally on the whole world. And in a sense, we have a huge responsibility to understand what it is that we're peddling here, what it is that we're pumping out as a society and a culture. Maybe not, and we just have to make what we can and just live with it. But I'm drawn to integrating spirituality into culture and bringing the mysticism into the American identity and experience and reality, and elevating those that have already done it. And sort of, I feel like that's why we're here today.
Consumerism sells, and what I find with true mystics and true mysticism is it is readily available, and that means that nobody is really profiting off of the experience or the teaching or the sacrament or whatever it is, whatever the method is. Nobody's profiting off of that. because there's no reason to do it, because if that's the goal, then it's not mystical anymore.
Yeah, at least in my experience, I feel like the most advanced beings, the realest, most spiritual beings, are following that model you're saying, where it's like there's no motivation in the first place to be trying to pump this out worldwide as like, buy this now, it'll heal everything, it'll cure this,
Right.
It'll save you from that, da 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 da.
Right.
Because they're living it and they're in such a state of peace, and in order to be in that peace, they can't even have the inner egoic motivations that would encourage them to try and hustle this thing that could change the whole world in the first place.
Right.
And in a weird way, now that as a result of that, the culture of spirituality is being spearheaded by those of the most capitalistic motivation and not the highest spiritual attainment.
Right.
There's these rare teachers, masters, gurus that are this perfect intersection where they're the absolute real deal and they've got these huge international missions. But a lot of times it seems like the realest beings don't have that motivation, and they're often with a small group or completely hidden from public view and just are invisible beings, essentially. Hopefully having a platform like this podcast will then allow some of those beings to have a voice without trying to have a voice, where it's just a simple conversation down the line that maybe we get to have with some of our spiritual teachers or friends that are spiritual, or friend teachers of friends, or I don't know, who knows what. But that's one of my hopes for this platform, is just to connect like-minded, universal spiritual people, regardless of your background, open up the conversation, get different flavors, different language models, and really prove the essence of what is implied in the title, is that we already kind of do have this mystic culture in America. It's just not mainstream enough to be really the predominant thing, or what people identify as what's most real right now, what's most happening. I would say what people identify with right now is mostly tension and violence and war and hatred and the world being in a broken place, even though if we shifted the focus, it might be pretty obvious that there's also a lot of great beings doing great things right now that we could be amplifying, and that could, if everyone focused on them instead of all the hate, there might be less of that violence in the first place.
Absolutely. I think the country is the most divided that it's ever been since Civil War. And I don't see personally a way out of that without coming to a common consensus that we have to love and respect one another. And politics don't teach that. But mysticism and mystical practicing does teach that. It implies it, because you have to have tolerance for the things that you don't know or understand, and also tolerance and acceptance for the things that you don't want to know and don't want to understand.
Right. I mean, it's one thing to try and figure out your political views and figure out how to enact what you think is right, but it's not even a conversation happening in our world that it's a learned skill, and it's a muscle to learn to flex, that empathy and cooperation and communication and the spiritual essence applied to working with your community is a skill that needs to be developed and harnessed, and is a value that we need to hold within all the values of, oh, you believe this, I believe that, this person believes this person believes that. And that's good. Like, believe what you want to believe and stand on your truth. But then, like, it's a whole different thing to just even learn how to play together, how to get along on the playground of life. And it's a skill that people aren't being taught how to develop, I feel like, a lot of the time, because it's not even viewed that way. It's not part of the curriculum. You want to be like a doctor, you go to 8 years of this or whatever. You want to be a politician, there should be some sort of like empathy or humanity training or something, where not literally, I'm not trying to enforce any models or projects, but just in general, it's like, I just think that there's a shortage of that muscle of just like even caring about the fact that you're debating with another whole human being that has a valid perspective and a whole life, and like it's not just one viewpoint versus another. It's like things working out and finding a way to cooperate versus the whole planet living in dysfunction. Like, that's what's at stake here. Like, forget right or wrong. Like, we're talking about living harmoniously or not, you know?
Yes.
That's what's at stake.
Yes.
So I don't know how close we are to a civil war or not, but I mean, I feel the tension, and I'm aware that there's some building sense to it, you know, and it's just not geographically divided in the way it was before the internet or whatever, or based on what all the contributing factors to what caused the Civil War to happen. So it's hard to know how that could even go down in a world where it's an ideological divide. It's not a geographic divide.
Right.
Like, what even is a civil war in that? Hopefully it doesn't exist at all, but it's just hard to imagine. I hope it doesn't go there.
I think if people would start addressing their own issues, their own personal issues, their own traumas, their own fears, their own wanting to understand, that alone is enough. If everybody did that, that alone is enough to cause peace.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's just there's just not a lot of tools that are readily available for mass culture. We do have a rising culture of therapy and psychology, and I think there's some value to that, but I think that it's really only now that the therapists are adopting, teaching people the actual tools to work with their state of being, that it's becoming more effective. And it's only the people that are lucky enough to get the therapists who are recommending cutting edge approaches in technology, which is actually ancient technology of like breathing exercises and affirmations and meditations and all the things that are, you know, the same things that the spiritual teachers are teaching. And that's what's causing certain people to get a benefit from that. But other than that, there's a lot of people that are still out there with no resources for inner peace and are used to, you know, a terrible state of dysfunction and discomfort as the norm of their reality and lives. And I wish there was a way to help people realize how accessible meditation is and how powerful the peace that lies in the inner space is, and like how easy it is to tap into that without it seeming like it has to be about a religion. You know, I forget who said it this way, but I kind of view it like brushing your teeth or something. It's like you're just clearing out the cobwebs of your mind. You know, it's not like you have to be seeking God just to meditate even. You know, it has its inherent value.
Right.
Even if you don't believe in God.
Yes. So you've mentioned meditation as a valid approach to what we were just discussing. What do you think are some other methods that people could use that maybe aren't ready to meditate or don't want to engage with somebody who has mastered meditation, like some of the teachers we've engaged with? What do you think those kinds of things look like for the typical American?
That's a great question, man. I think that's part of why this podcast has to exist, because there's all of these outlets that are already there and people just don't identify with them as spiritual. And I think that there's a lot of degrees to the answer of what you're saying, because different things can take you to different levels of the inner experience. Mm-hmm. And there's like different like plateaus or precipices or precipices or precipi, whatever you might say, that one would leap off of at different points depending on what the vessel is for having that experience. Like, and I mean, these are just like the obvious things would be things that put you in a flow state, but also allow your body to be relaxed enough where you can attune to the inner space. So something like stretching or dancing or singing, you know, these all put you into your presence, allow you to attune to the energy level of your physical being and kind of tap into the first invisible layer of reality, which is always right there. It's just like, even just feeling your own body is like getting back to the moment and tapping back in to the energy and the truth. And so to do something as simple as jump or spin in a circle, it gives you the spiritual experience. People don't realize to laugh wholeheartedly with your whole body is to just be engaged outside of your mind and tune back into the moment. And you're having a spiritual experience, not just the emotion of the laugh, but the physical consciousness of being in the laugh is a different headspace. It's a different vantage point and consciousness. And so I feel like there's all of these. I actually have a rough draft of a book, to tell you the truth, that I just wrote that kind of addresses this principle. And not to get into it fully right now because I'm still editing it, but it's like there's all of these invisible portals, so to speak, but there's all of these flow states that you can enter in your everyday life. And just an example that's taken over my life recently, it sounds crazy, but playing basketball is one of the most spiritual things I can imagine. I mean, you have to be fully attuned to your vessel, and then there's this ball that it has, it's relating to geometry perfectly. It's a reflection of reality. It's not going to bounce wrong, so you have to be in alignment with this reflection of the external world. It's very much like Tai Chi. I mean, I don't play competitively. I would probably lose my flow state and totally get dominated if I tried to play a pickup game. But just like dribbling and shooting and just feeling the consciousness of that, to me, is just like this very transcendent spiritual thing. I mean, that's a very worldly example, but I feel like in order to be a master basketball player, you have to be very zen. You have to be very sort of in your Tai Chi of all of your movements are conscious and intentional and controlled, and you're on the dime, you're on the spot, you're in the moment. And it's like a transcendent thing, and that's why they make so much money, and people like worship basketball players like LeBron James as like almost deity level beings, because they've fully they're like so present that it's become spiritual. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's a form of mysticism. It's a really just random example, I'm sorry, but
it's a great example, but something's allowed you to understand basketball that way.
Yeah. Guitar has been treating, I'm not as advanced, but it's been treating me the same way. Not to dive into it, but I'm curious, what are some examples that speak to you? Because I know it's so multifaceted.
I mean, obviously meditation, but I'm finding nowadays that memory is incredibly important. And being able to recall some of these things that I've gone through that I don't totally understand still. And just simply contemplating that, it makes me want to meditate. So it moves me a direction that where my mind is not doing anything, but my mind is doing something up until that point. Mm-hmm. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're orienting your consciousness towards the consciousness of the memory. And so in a way you can almost superimpose previous states of being or epiphanies or revelations or visions or experiences through memory, it seems like.
Yeah.
It's kind of a gateway back to that state of consciousness, even if it at first is manufactured to a degree. Yeah. There seems to be a real relationship where the imagination and the mind are this powerful spiritual mechanism when used properly, like you're saying.
Absolutely. I can roll a cigarette and access any memory that I've got about rolling a cigarette.
That's
because
true.
It's a thing that's important to me.
Absolutely. Yeah, bro. Well, I think there's more to the spiritual ceremony of your cigarette rolling we can get back to another time for sure. But I do think that just to stick with memory for a second, like this has been coming up lately in other spiritual conversations I've been having, and there's really something to it, man. I mean, just to even remember certain, like going to certain meditations with spiritual teachers, it really just is so transportative, and it just takes my mind, and it's more than just my mind. It like almost orients your whole being to that memory in such a way where you can just tap right back into the consciousness. I know I already said that, but it's really wild how it's like, it's more than just like, oh, I'm thinking, well, let's start on the human level. It's like you can sit there thinking about your ex or thinking about this problem or thinking about, dwelling on whatever one would dwell on. And you really can go into that emotion so easily and just tune back into the suffering and tune back into the heartbreak and tune back into whatever. I think anybody can. But I think the same power of imagination is not being harnessed for the good as much, where people remember their their past loved ones, and it has a kind of spiritual effect as well. Maybe that's even just as an example of what you're saying, like maybe it really is connecting us when we remember those that we've loved and we've lost. It seems like it's actually connecting us to their living energy in the present moment, even though they're not in their bodies anymore, whether they're on a heavenly plane or they've reincarnated or they're just a part of the ether, or I don't know the details of every person and every afterlife, but it's like, it seems like there's still some essence that's left that you can connect to with those you've lost, and it's almost like you're not necessarily channeling or summoning, maybe so, maybe not, but there's this real living feeling of like, you can almost feel like you're with them still.
Yes.
It's, and that's, you know, loved ones, but I think when it comes to spiritual experiences, it's almost like this fascinating phenomenon where you get a shortcut to a realm where it's like you unlock a consciousness almost. You can't necessarily replicate the same vision ever, but you can almost invoke or inculcate the memory of the vision in such a way where you now have access to that realm and to that consciousness and to that experience.
Yes.
It seems like, you know, that's kind of what the mantra is doing in a sense. It's like, it's just bringing that energy. You're just focusing on a deity or a principle or an energy, and it's just like you're kind of forcing the imagined memory in a way. You're kind of invoking the realm through memory, even though it's not necessarily a conscious memory that you've even attained yet, but it's like you're connected to everyone who's ever done the mantra, and all of the lived memory and visions of their experiences. And so if you could connect to a real lineage with a real powerful, empowered mantra by a guru, you're connecting yourself to all the beings and all of their visions connected to that mantra too. I mean, that's some powerful stuff.
Yes. What I like about the word guru is it means destroyer of darkness. And so that is by my definition, that is the mystic. It is the thing that is, it's the universe expanding.
The embodiment of the principle that is the mystic.
Yes.
They're the mystic embodied in a way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I see that. I've always felt that, but it's such a literal thing when you describe it like that. It's like, it seems, conceptually, they're like a spokesman for God, but no, it's like they might literally be an active representation of that force.
Yes. And that's why ultimately it's an internal phenomenon, not an external. So in order for something to be, or for someone to be the guru, it's actually you going through a process and not this separate thing going through a process. The separate thing has already gone through the process.
Right.
It's the light at the end of the tunnel. But for whatever reason,
we have the illusion.
We're still seeing the tunnel.
Right. Yeah, man. But it's like the light is the light. The light's there, and it's really just our perception of the tunnel. It's not like...
Yes.
Yeah. So it's hard to keep that level of consciousness in mind when you're in the lived experience of being with the spiritual master and all that comes with the scene that's required to exist around them for them to function as a public meditation teacher. It's like, it's so easy to just lose the fact that it's like they're already there and they're really working you through. How do you even say it? They're becoming themselves through us, or whatever. We're becoming ourselves as them through us, or there's so many ways to say it or angles to word it, but it's like it's already there, and we're just coming to. I don't know. I feel like
I'm with you, and it's hard to expound upon that because
because it
is an internal phenomena.
Right.
It's not an external phenomena. Like that light is you. That's what we're all looking for. Anybody listening to this right now is looking for that, or they've questioned looking for that, which means they're really looking for it.
Exactly. Well, that's why I'm stumbling on my words, because it seems like it's other, but it's really just coming to our true self. And so it's hard to even describe what's happening in these meditation situations, because here you have a being that's fully united with the light and with the true self and with reality and creation, if you're with a true master, a true guru, or a prophet, or whomever we're talking about, an avatar, they're already one with the self in such a way where that means they're more of you than you, even though we're all fully the self. It's like they're your higher self because they're, or maybe a future self, although it's not about a time-based thing, because they're already more connected to the true you than the person you think you are is connected to the true you.
Right.
And so are you unbecoming who you think you are, or are you just returning to who you've always been? And then the duality of even identifying with guru or disciple, meditation, meditator, even, let alone, student teacher, like the dualities fall away and the line blurs, and it's hard to even know at a certain point, well, if I'm the same self that every enlightened being that's ever been is too, then where does this consciousness that resides in my body, is looking out of my eyes right now, how does that fit into all of that? Have we all perceived everything already and we're just blocking infinite memory? Or is it something that only certain lineages of souls and beings and tiers of consciousnesses are connected to certain pockets of memories? Mm-hmm. I don't know.
It's the tunnel. The light doesn't need the tunnel to exist, but the tunnel does need the light in order to exist. Otherwise, it's just a hole.
Exactly. Yeah, we're getting pretty deep into the pretty deep in the woods here, man. But yeah, it gets so convoluted that it's hard to really orient what is. Well, I think everything is God, and say what is God, what isn't. I'd say everything is, but to tie it back to why we're here now, it's like what is spiritual and what isn't. If you know everything's connected, everything is created by the same divine consciousness and energy and force and frequency and being or beingness or transcendence of either of those titles, whatever you want to call it. If everything's coming from the same energy, then how can you call something that's been created by God not spiritual? And then where do you draw the line in terms of what is valid to be deemed as spiritual and what isn't? And it gets more obvious when it comes to morality. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, oh, you're doing harm to other people. You're creating this negative ripple. You're negatively affecting reality. But then again, it's like, God created this whole system that has to consume other matter in order to continue its life form. So the whole principle of life on earth is built on death in a certain regard. And like the whole notion of any happiness is built on the suffering of that which has come before it, in a sense. And so it's hard to even say that the notion of unhappiness, pain, suffering, all of that is even unspiritual in itself, because it's divinely necessary to some degree for reality to function. So is that spiritual too? Because then that permits a lot of negative activity to occur. And I think there has to be some sort of moralistic embodiment of spirituality that's upheld for true spirituality to even be spirituality. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's my false human projection and assumption that there's some justice principle connected to spirituality, and that things have to be harmonious and just to be fully divine or fully spiritual. But it's like when everyone's suffering and everything's in chaos, it doesn't feel, I don't think we deem that as spiritual. Maybe it's mystical, but not spiritual.
Yeah. Right. I mean, I guess I was trying to think of a metaphor because I don't know how to respond to what you just said because it's incredibly deep. And I couldn't come up with a linguistic model to do it other than through a metaphor. And what I would say is imagine a shuffled deck of cards and taking that shuffled deck of cards and taking the time to put it back into order as if you just recently bought it.
Yeah, that's the care that's required
So the chaos isn't spiritual. It's still a deck of cards.
But isn't
the chaos is spiritual. It may not seem that way. I just misspoke.
Oh, I got you. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
The chaos is spiritual.
Yeah, exactly.
It is seemingly out of order.
But the role of chaos itself may be spiritual. The function and the idea or the energy of chaos might actually be serving the greater unity and harmony in some way.
Right. If God is infinite, therefore it has to have infinite perspective. And so if it's going to experience itself, it's going to infinitely limit that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And if that perspective is infinitely limited, then it has to work itself out of that by having experiences in the first place, by having perception in the first place, by having limitations and ignorance in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
It has to have that as a base.
To return to a connected, unified consciousness.
Absolutely.
Working out the karma of all of the conflicted, inherent boundaries of having separate perceptions.
Yes.
It just catalyzes that whole journey back. So in a way, even if something's not overtly spiritual unto itself, it's a part of the continuum of the evolution of consciousness that's based on this things that are tense rubbing up against one another, conflict, creating a new perspective over time that grows and grows and grows and grows until there is a spiritual perspective that's assumed. Supposedly, that's at least the spiritual belief would be that there's an inherent evolution to consciousness. And therefore, I think this is what you're saying, is that the role of chaos is to serve that greater spiritual function.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's hard to define and limit all the constructs of creation all at once, but I do think that there's something to it. But it's like the obvious counter argument that people historically have gone to is just like, well, then was the Holocaust spiritual? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it's like, that's why I think it's worth clarifying, like, each act unto itself might not be deemed mystic or spiritual. Mm-hmm. But then we're just talking about the big picture of how everything works together in all of creation to potentially lead consciousness to a more spiritual state through these conflicts. Not that each conflict and what motivated it and the actions taken within it are inherently positive or spiritual. Mm-hmm. So it's such a fine line then, working with that, because there's no rule book, there's no playbook. In people's religions, well, there is rule books and playbooks, they're called religions.
Yeah.
But the thing is that religions are not inherently perfectly functioning mystical systems anymore after the degradation of time, in my opinion. I got my judgments, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. But it seems like the world is craving other outlets for spirituality and mysticism because there's no playbook you can just turn to and say, well, this is the clear moral code. This is what is spiritual. This is what's right, and this is what's wrong. Mm-hmm. You know, you've got some uptight old world and puritanical vibes saying no, 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 no. And then there's been a whole spiritual revolution since the 60s where it's just like turn everything into spirituality and then start saying yes, yes, yes to life. And now, this is just my interpretation of it, but now as a culture, we've just blown ourselves out of the water. We've destroyed any roadmap, any sense of like, this is right and this is wrong that we all held on to. Mm-hmm. Doesn't really exist anymore. And that's why certain groups are clinging to liberal values, certain groups are clinging to conservative values. I think it's the same impulse that's saying like, I need a structure to make sense of this thing. Mm-hmm. And I don't think either of them are entirely right or wrong. I have my judgments about both sides and sets of opinions, some more than others in different ways here and there. That's not the point. Like, the point is that I feel like the real answer to what we're clinging to and yearning for is identifying what's already mystic and what's already active in our culture, in our society.
Yes.
And then that's what will create the new playbook, even if it's a transcendent non-playbook like the New Covenant principle, where it's like self-governed spirituality, and it makes sense for each of us in our own way, but there's some sense of clarity in approach that we can develop. It just seems like it's the Wild West spiritually in that sense. You're either fully in someone else's thing, or you're just off in the wind and you're on your own. And if you don't agree with this religion or this new age spiritual structure, well then, you know, you don't believe in any spirituality, and you just do whatever you want, and there's live lawlessly. But then what defines and motivates your morality and your yearning to know more of the invisible worlds and the mystical possibilities that are hidden in plain sight, you know?
I think challenging your limitations, challenging your perceptions is what, it's how you live as a mystic. So, say you're a person that does a mantra all the time, or you try to do it all the time. Can you do that in a traffic jam? Can you do that when somebody's being aggressive in the grocery store?
Right.
Or, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, is it limited?
Can you keep saying in your head, while that's happening? Or not?
It's hard, man. Yeah.
It's difficult.
I've never been able to keep it going like that. I mean...
And I'm not saying that being able to do that, or actually doing that as you're being challenged, is what is mystical. I'm saying more so, can you recover from that?
Mm-hmm.
Can you, say you screw up and you forget your mantra and the traffic clears, and then you remember your mantra again, and then you start doing it again, or you de-escalate the situation with whoever it is, and then you remember. That's still mysticism happening.
Right. I mean, yeah, like your degree of mysticism might be how much you can keep that level of consciousness and that tone of your being, that feeling within your being present during those adversities, because it's I'm not going to say it's easy to be spiritual when you're meditating, quote unquote, because even meditating has its own difficulties, and you can be lost in thoughts and not feel very spiritual while you're meditating. But let's say that's the easiest place to feel spiritual. Can you have that same feeling in the situation that feels most unspiritual?
Right.
Is the real test. And there's so many tools, and I don't think there's one real right path, but I do think that by presenting a more open approach to spirituality and a life that's filled with more and more outlets of spirituality, that primes you to click into that as a default mode. It becomes a natural thing. Yes. As opposed to, I'm so frustrated, I need to turn it on. You're just already in the flow of grace, as you could say. There's a Krishna Das album called Flow of Grace. I didn't mean to steal his phrase, but it's like, it literally is like a flowing river of grace. It's already there, and it's like, are you going to tap into it? And then if you're in it already, then how is an adversity going to affect you? Is it really going to hit you as hard if you're already blissful? Or, are you going to... It's a totally different game to try and recover from something when you go to what you might deem a non-spiritual state of consciousness, versus just have such an overpowering spiritual presence that you're unfazed in the first place, where you don't even perceive adversity as adversity anymore.
Right. It's not reactionary. It's doing it because you see it as helpful, or because it's working towards whatever you want to work towards. It's you moving through that tunnel because you see that light in the first place. Absolutely.
But I have to wonder even how much we're limited to the practices or to the activities of spirituality when it comes to embodying and living in that spiritual state that we're talking about. And so that's the whole Zen principle, is like, at what point is your non-doing and your presence within your non-doing, or even just your calm stillness sort of non-doing vibe within doing, complete activity, complete action, but you still have a tone of inaction within action, is kind of, I think, some phrasing that they would use. Like, how does that fit into it? Because at a certain point, like, the activity of a practice almost gets in the way of just purely relating to whatever it is. And like, is like Zen the ultimate conclusion of every spiritual path in a sense, where it's like you just get down to the core of whatever version of your culture you're in, versus like, I don't know, is it, are, I guess other beings, you know, you just naturally stick with a practice your whole life and you just ride that out, and that's the presence is within that thing. But it's like, I think part of what the American spirit and the American culture and the vibe and the intention for this podcast, what it's really all about, is like finding a way where we're not stuck in a spiritual model, or even not stuck in a practice sometimes.
Absolutely.
I mean, I still hold on to my daily practices like it's my life raft, but like sometimes I have to question myself, like, is my attachment to the practice getting in the way of my state of consciousness?
I was listening to a lecture from Ram Dass years ago. But he talked about the iron chain and the golden chain.
Right.
And the iron chain is the chain that we're all bound to. It's our normal attachments. It's our normal vices. It's our normal shit. And then, so that's what's binding us to illusion. That's what's binding us to that which is not the truth, that is ignorance. That's, you know, phrase it however you want. And then there are some that are bound by the golden chain, which is essentially their method. It's their mystical method that's giving them mystical experiences, but it's still a chain. And so at what point do you call a chain and stop calling it gold or iron?
Yeah.
You know?
I hear you, but it's funny that it's using chain as the metaphor, because I've heard Amma, just for the viewers at home, Amritananda Mayima, the hugging saint, if you haven't heard of her, she's a great teacher. I'm sure we'll talk about her more in depth in the future sometime, but I've heard a quote from her where she's talking about it as a golden thread, that spiritual identification and spiritual attachment is like a golden thread. It's still an attachment, it's still a thread that's tethering you to the illusion, but it's a golden thread instead of a golden
thread,
chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like,
it's so much more weak.
Yeah,
and that's really the reality of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's so flimsy, because when you really get into the spiritual state, you go beyond yourself. And so really there's the spiritual ego doesn't have much wiggle room to even exist. I mean, it's halfway between not existing and existing in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's like, to give it the weight of being a chain is almost to give it too much power, in my opinion, almost to the point where it becomes more real, even just by thinking about it as a chain instead of a thread. I don't know. No. That just hit my mind. I mean, but you're right. They say that like the spiritual attachment is like the last chain in a sense, you know, the last like cage before awakening. And so there's value to having that, because it is a final and necessary step that you have to work with. And so I think that, as opposed to what has happened in American culture in the past, which is we celebrate cultural beings and we celebrate religious beings, and we don't necessarily see who the middle point of mystic beings are, that by focusing on those beings who are from America or have intersected with American culture in a significant way in recent history, it gives us these highlight examples of beings who have had that golden thread in a unique way, and sometimes even severed it, you know, and gives us something to chew on, to say, hey, you know, I might not be them, but I can learn from how they did it and how their angle on it.
Absolutely.
And I value a lot of spiritual teachers that have intersected with American culture, but I really feel like what's underrepresented are certain beings like hip-hop artists and filmmakers and thoughtful, conscious, profound beings that have contributed to culture, but have just kind of hid behind making art about it, as opposed to putting themselves on a podium or something. And those are the beings where their work is their message, and we can really dig in, hopefully in future episodes, or maybe later in this episode, into like specific examples of why something really just knocked it out of the park, and why this person if you saw the intro, you can tell not everyone that we're talking about is even from America, but I would still consider it part of this American culture, because it's intersecting with us and with this international culture that's being developed sort of in connection to America, as we were talking about earlier. So I really wanted to dig into some of those beings. and they're not all from America, but I still consider it a part of this Mystic Americana principle. And just to speak on another obvious aspect of the word Americana that we kind of left out in our previous conversation, that I feel like kind of we were right next to it, but we kind of took it in a different direction. The idea of Americana already exists. It's like a style of art, a style of music. It's like a subculture. This podcast isn't specifically just referring to that subgenre of music and that style of art. But it is interesting how I feel like it's connected to the American South specifically, and sort of like mountain music and folk music is a part of it, you know? And here we are in Western North Carolina right now, so it's like, you know, part of us being here and having this conversation, I feel like is inherently Americana, just even in our origins, and the fact that we're, you know, Southerners in a sense, you know, from the Southeast in America. And so our cultural perspective is immersed within the phenomenon of Americana, which is an actual cultural movement. And it's not completely limiting or defining what this podcast is, but it's kind of an adjacent principle that feels like it's worth acknowledging within this conversation, because I think inherently there is a bit of a mystic sort of vein within Americana as the phrase known for the culture that already exists, right? There's this tone of the, you know, the mysticism of the Blue Ridge Mountains, and the wisdom of, you know, whatever gave rise to, like, the intersection of some of the music here has to do with our Celtic and European roots and more abstract folklore from that world, but also, you know, the culture of the South, including slaves and things like that. And like the I don't want to misspeak here, but all the hymnals and everything that's tied into that culture that can then be drawn back to this intersection of African culture and this finding the spirituality of Christianity because they were forced into this situation. And then this new culture sort of emerged that's a hybrid of what was brought over and what was already here, and is tied into the origins of what Americana culture became. And so it does have this sort of spiritual level to it that is subliminally even in folk music and even in the crafts people and the, you know, the artists and weavers and things and basket makers and potters and things of the American South. And this whole Americana principle, you know, is kind of a mystic flavor in itself that has been kind of branded within American culture as a whole. I don't know if I'm misrepresenting this phrasing, but you see what I'm saying?
I do. I mean, we're filming this in the oldest mountain range in the world. These rocks are older than physical life on Earth.
Oh my gosh, dude, that's crazy to think
that we're
about.
sitting on.
Wow. That's powerful.
So when you think about who's been drawn here, the natives, the settlers and colonizers, and how all of those things have come together, to me it more so points to something that's ancient, not to something that's contemporary.
Yeah, there's something beyond what we can perceive even that's just drawing people to this place. And
Yeah.
there's a magnetism to it.
Absolutely. And there's some level of commonality that people have found here to be able to live with one another and not kill each other.
Very true.
Not that people haven't gotten killed here.
No, but it's a unique blending of cultures.
Yep.
And worlds, and yeah, there's something to it. So I'm glad that this podcast is here to start for our first episode, and that there is something about the DNA of what we're trying to do, even the pursuit of finding spirituality in culture that is ingrained in this place. Because as people found their cultural and artistic forms of self-expression, it was connected to the ancient mystic mountains, as you're describing. And that's there in the fabric of the feeling of the types of music and the, you know, the blues and the folk of it all.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, like, it's that it is the Mystic Americana approach that made this thing called Americana music or different forms of Americana culture already. And now that's kind of the same. It's not the same culture, but it's the same intention and the same motivation. I feel like that we're grasping at finding the spiritual within culture and the spiritual beyond culture while living within society and its culture through the conversation of this podcast. And that's exactly what happened organically here over the last period of time. And who knows, you go back to the natives, it's hard to imagine what sort of amazing culture existed in this exact space for maybe thousands of years or much longer.
Probably longer than that.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine, but this could have been a very mountain where some amazing ceremonial stuff has been happening, and the perfect intersection of the peak of culture at that time and the peak of spirituality at that time were actively infused and, you know, and lived out in the highest way possible within this very land. I mean, so I don't know how far we'll attain in our attempts to tap into similar principles and achieve similar goals within our lives, but it's great to be a part of that, even just tangentially, because our hearts are in the same place. That's why we're having this conversation. So I don't know if it's worth us diving into any more specific applications of this principle now that we've kind of outlined, okay, what is the mystic? What is American culture and its connection to mysticism and Americana, the literal actual thing? Mm-hmm. We've kind of set it up. I think that hopefully the dialogue is clear to our audience, whoever that may be now, that that this is...
Or in the future.
You know, about our intention, our motivation, what we're interested in, what we want to sink our teeth into in these discussions that we're having here. And if you have any sort of inspiration about topics that you want to discuss, things that you want to be said or spoken on or contemplated or ruminated over between us or between other combinations of beings and guests and things, please, you know, comment down below or let us know, reach out. We would love to see what's worth exploring, because it's really about the active conversation. We're not here to say we have answers and this is the new law. This is spiritual. This ain't. This is on the throne. Put that shit in the trash. Now give this a crown. Now burn this. No, it's like, I'm not here to declare reality. I just want to highlight what I resonate with. But I know there's so many more spiritual teachers, so many more communities of people and amazing practices and activities and even just music and movies and things that I'm not aware of that would absolutely blow my mind and might be the perfect epitome of what we're seeking in this project of encapsulating the Mystic Americana, whatever that is. So, you know, just as a little starting point, I don't know if this is worth going into, but let's see, I collected some quotes that we could ruminate over, perhaps. But no, if you don't mind, I'd love to give a specific example that is on my heart at the moment.
Please.
So, you know, not everyone's going to find this spiritual, and that's why I'm excited to talk about it, to be honest. But one of my favorite American filmmakers just released a new film. I saw it last night. It's called One Battle After Another by Paul Thomas Anderson. And to me, historically, maybe not this film as much, and maybe so in some ways, we could get into it or not, but I feel like he's really knocked it out of the park in terms of conveying subtle spiritual messages in his filmography. And not all of his films are like that, but when he does, it's such a profound experience because you don't see it coming, because it's subtle and it's integrated, and it's not like wearing a badge like, this is a spiritual movie. Everything's going to be about spirituality. It's like, it's a normal life thing happening. Even the one movie he made about a guru and a disciple called The Master, which is amazing, with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Joaquin Phoenix. One of my favorite movies, but it's like, it seems like it's a human tale about spiritual people, and they don't draw attention to it. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. But there's mystical, visionary moments that are all throughout it, and they just drop little hints about cycles of life and death and consciousness beyond the body and people going in and out of dreams and memories seamlessly. You don't even know that you're in a dream or a memory before you're already out of it. And sometimes you come out of it and you didn't even notice it happened until the rewatch or the rewatch.
Yeah.
And it's that deep. And it's like, to me, you know, obviously a movie will never be as spiritual as like a meditation program and actually tuning into that consciousness itself. But there's something really profound about indirectly conveying the spiritual through film that almost like spiritual teachers can't achieve, because they're just saying, this is what it is. And every person hears their own version of like, oh, I get what that means, but we're all hearing our own version of it. But when it comes to perceiving a movie, there's like, you're almost like seeing someone else's memory. It's like, to tie it back to the memory thing, it's like you're literally perceiving reality through someone else's eyes and like experiencing their life almost as a memory. And so, you know, obviously David Lynch is like the king when it comes to spiritual filmmaking in America, and weaving in dream logic is a phrase he uses a lot into his filmmaking. And I just love that, the idea of dream logic, that yes, there is some subconscious mysterious element to it and it's beyond this reality, but there's logic to that different type of realm as well. And David Lynch really tried to put that into his filmmaking. And I feel like, you know, rest in peace, hopefully David Lynch is one with divine consciousness right now, or whatever happens, reincarnated, I don't know his path, but as far as living filmmakers go, Paul Thomas Anderson, they call him PTA, he's my goat. He's the guy where I'm like, he's carrying the mystic torch right now. He's really doing it. But, okay, so he had his latest movie, or maybe he was doing it. I don't know. Do you define a filmmaker by their highest achievement or their whole body of work? It's hard to say. I loved his most recent film, but I wouldn't say it's his highest mystical achievement by any means, nor was that his goal. It was, mostly a movie about a father trying to save his daughter. And it's a very human tale in that regard. But what I think he does successfully is that same subtlety and that same approach he takes to spirituality, he took with politics this time. Mm-hmm. Where he's not speaking on politics, there's just political tensions in the background, racist things and immigration tensions and things happening in the background. So it's a commentary on all of that without ever trying to comment on it, because it's just him telling a story about, you know, this retired revolutionary stoner dad, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, trying to save his daughter. And so he's able to go into the nuances of humanity and human relationships, and it is spiritual in that sense, where it's like the father's love of a daughter, and you know this better than I ever will, as a father, like that is a spiritual thing too. That's a portal to divine love when viewed properly as well, in my opinion. As someone who doesn't have any kids, I say casually, but it seems like, you know, that's kind of the mystic truth he was trying to convey in that, is that finding that empathy and that love that's beyond yourself, you know, is what saves the day. Mm-hmm. And so that's the message of a lot of, you know, heartfelt American movies. But PTA just does it with class and subtlety and charm and just, you know, sort of this hilarious stonerism approach that I just love. So obviously a more spiritual example, just to stay on him for 1 second, I don't want to spend the whole conversation talking about this one filmmaker, but there's a movie he did called Phantom Thread, which is about a tailor, or a sort of a fashion designer from high society England, like in the 50s or something. But he's like a perfectionist, uptight, intense dude at the end of his peak career. And so it's really about him detaching from, like, losing his faculties, getting older, losing touch, getting close to death, and like coming to terms with that. Mm-hmm. But like within that, and this is just such a crazy oversimplification, just watch the movie if you haven't, but it's like there's all of these mystic things that are interwoven into it, where like he's sick and has a vision of his mother in this wedding dress that inspired his whole career as a designer and a sewer and everything. And like her whole thing was they they sewed some prayer of hope into her wedding dress, and he had to make the wedding dress for some reason. And so that became a thing for him, where then he wove a message and had the phantom thread, right? There's an invisible spirit that he would kind of imbue into every piece that he made. And it's about his spiritual relationship to making dresses and how it's like the highest ceremony for him. Mm-hmm. It's like he's a guru and his meditation program is making a dress. And then it's like literally putting a prayer, putting a mantra, putting an affirmation into and like sewing it up so it's invisible and just like phantom. So, you know, the idea of it's funny I'm saying this now, but phantom thread is the Mystic Americana. Phantom is like this mysterious principle. If you don't think of it as an entity, of a phantom like a ghost, phantom as a concept is like the ethereal, sort of invisible, mysterious realm principle in a different way.
Right.
And then the thread is the connectivity that brings it all together, which represents the Americana principle that we're talking about, because it's more about the culture that connects the spiritual phenomenon together than it is about America.
I like that a lot.
So it's kind of like the podcast of the Phantom Thread in a sense. But wow, you know, those are just some highlight examples, but like PTA is a genius, and I hope that he continues to do more mystical, subtle, spiritual things as he continues to mature in age, because, you know, he's a father of teenage daughters right now. It makes sense. He's making this movie right now. I get it. But it's like, to me, when he's at his peak, is things like I just described, or like in There Will Be Blood. Yeah, There Will Be Blood is like about the descent of a man into madness and ego and becoming a demon basically over his greed for oil. But they show so much spiritual insight about human nature and these other energies working through us and connecting to our Christian history as a nation and finding this powerful spiritual aspect of that weaves into it. It's like, it seems like it's about one thing, but it's actually very spiritual, very mystic. And to me, PTA is a prime example of what we're seeking to, you know, congratulate and highlight and elevate in this conversation here. So I'm so glad I got to see his movie already. It's definitely worth checking out, but it's more of an action movie. It's the wildest ride that he's ever done in that regard. Would I say one battle after another fits into the Mystic Americana umbrella? Maybe not so much, but a lot of his catalog does. And so I felt like he was worth bringing up as just one first example of like, here's someone who actually, you might think he's a Hollywood fucking egotistical madman, but he's found a way to craft some very subtle, contemplative, introspective, spiritual pieces of work that are pillars to me in terms of, you know, what is truly mystic and will stand the test of time. If America can survive 100 or 200 years, what culture is going to survive with that? And that's one of those, you know, a lot of his filmography are some of those spiritual gems that I think will stand the test of time. He definitely stands out to me as a mystic director, let's say.
That's good to know. I'll have to check more of that out. I've seen There Will Be Blood, but I've not seen any of the other films that you've mentioned.
I know. I'm sorry to just rattle all that up, but I wanted to share in case anyone is interested in seeing his work, you know. I mean, not to get into all the lore of it, but oddly enough, he's married to Maya Rudolph from SNL.
Okay.
So he's such an interesting point of like serious filmmaking and loves comedy, and it's like a part of American culture in this very different way that most people wouldn't say, hey, that's mystical.
I think comedy is inherently mystical because it's meant to challenge your normal pattern of thought and get you out of that and make it joyful.
Absolutely.
Make it accepting, you know.
So it inherently breaks your mundane pattern to have that hit of, you didn't see that coming, boom. If you're laughing, that means you might have had that mystical moment, whether you even realize it or not.
Yeah, and to me, comedy targets suffering.
It's a remedy in that regard.
Yeah, it targets it. It makes something, a joke out of something.
Yeah.
And so it's at something's expense, and usually it's the the confusion or the misunderstanding or the stupidity or the ridiculousness of normal everyday life that becomes the target. And so it does something to people listening to comedy or watching comedy that kind of makes them be like, well, that's not such a big deal anymore.
Yeah, that's true. It breaks down paradigms. It like shakes you out of your emotional state and your mental state, and it like has all of these, not to mention actually physically laughing is really good for you, and probably is like a meditative thing into itself. But yeah, so now that you're bringing that up, like, are there any comedians or movies or specific examples of things where you're like, you know, that's not just comedy, that's mystic, you know?
Dave Chappelle makes me cry laughing.
Yeah, dude.
And it's because he does his comedy in such a way where he's telling a story and you forget he's doing comedy.
Yeah, he draws you in fully.
He draws you in fully, and then he just says something fucking crazy.
Yeah, you know? So it's like you don't even remember you're in a comedy experience, and then
yeah,
just shatters
you're just following along, and then it's just like, boom.
Yeah,
like,
man.
Okay, now you're out of it. All right, now we're continuing the story, and boom. Now you're out of it. All right, now we're going to continue the story, and boom. That's it. Okay, now really, really laugh. Really, really laugh. Okay, now I'm telling another story.
He's a master of that play. It's like he's doing 4D chess. We don't even see him up here drawing us in or pulling us out of something before he hits us with something. And I feel like a lot of times he's trying to make some point, and that's it's not like like the comedy is led by the bit, but the comedy is led by the point.
Yes.
So he can draw you back in and be like, I'm telling you something that I care about. And then that feeling is what sort of blindsides you when the comedy hits again.
Yeah.
So it's almost like it wouldn't be possible to be that level of comic without message and meaning and some sort of subtext or thematic thing that you're trying to infuse into that.
Yep.
And that's kind of what being mystical is, in a sense.
Yes.
Where it's like having an invisible, mysterious layer to your own approach and your own being in a certain regard.
Yep.
I don't necessarily always agree with his positions or his phrasing or his ideologies or conceptions, but he's definitely a master storyteller, and it seems like a very mystical being in nature.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I think he's done a lot for the Black community in general of just empowering people to be themselves and be okay with whatever.
Yeah, he's not following the rule book.
That is.
And even just Chappelle Show as a whole, now that you're saying it, it's like it's a critique of stereotypes.
Yeah,
where
absolutely.
It's saying like, and by him even being able to critique it, even though he embodied it through his characters, he's separating himself from it in a way and being like, I can comment on this because I'm above this.
Yes.
And it almost creates a spiritual evolution that through every sketch, he transcended anyone's ability to put him in a stereotype because he's already made a joke about that stereotype and he's got it in his back fucking pocket.
Yep.
His writing partner is for that show, Neal Brennan, is really good at that stuff too. He's really freaking witty and insightful. I'm grateful to say that a few years ago he just was on Instagram like, does anyone want a free ticket to my Broadway show? And I just hit him up and got these 2 tickets. So it's like I got to see Blocks live in New York, and it was just amazing the way his brain works, man. I'm just like, you know, he's onto some spiritual stuff now too. He's like meditating and doing ayahuasca and stuff, and he's like all promoting all of that. So it's like, it's interesting to see how it's like there was already that subtle implicit spiritual level to his previous work of like what we're talking about, defying stereotypes as spiritual in Chappelle Show. But now he's taken it to this literal level where like he's really a seeker and a practitioner, and like I think he talks about it in his act, so I know a little bit of his history without knowing him, but it's like he dated some yoga girls or something. He found, like, accidentally found himself tapping into these mystic cultures until he's like, wait a second, there's something here, you know? And then once you put psychedelics in with it, well, then it's like, you know, the visions are undeniable, and it's hard to deny. It's hard to not contemplate the mystic when you realize that just below the surface of our consciousness is a lot of room for a lot of different experiences and consciousnesses that we're all really locked out of most of the time.
Yeah.
Now, I think the art of spirituality is knowing how to tune into which energy and which consciousness according to your will, and not just to be like at the whim of whatever is happening, but even being able to direct yourself towards the divine in itself is like orienting your experience in a way.
Yeah. We're all in the same boat, but like who's got a paddle, or who's got a sail or a rudder or whatever.
True, bro. Yeah. I mean, who's got the tools? Yeah. That's what it all comes down to. Hey, so while we're on the topic of comedians, though, I'm curious about your thoughts on this, on one particular comedian reflecting upon, R.I.P. the great George Carlin, right? Mm-hmm. He had a lot to say, and he was very passionate and charged up, and I think he had a moral message and a positive message, and in a sense, a spiritual message. But I also feel like his critique of what's wrong, maybe it was just an act, but part of his comedy stylings was that his critiquing of what's wrong was fired the fuck up and was like super aggressively dialed in and attacking what's wrong. Mm-hmm. So like, I wonder, to what degree do you deem that approach spiritual?
It reminds me a lot of myself because I like to complain.
Yeah.
I like to critique and judge things. And ultimately, that's not helpful. I don't know where George Carlin was at.
No, I don't claim to at all.
I've got no idea where he was at or what his ultimate goal was.
Yeah. It seems like he had positive altruistic intentions and was spiritual in his motivations for his rantings and ramblings and ravings and screamings. But I just wonder, is that state inherently unspiritual in the first place? If you can't find peace and speak from peace and say, there's probably there's a chill comedic way to convey all the same shit where it doesn't consume you, but maybe not. I don't know.
Well, I think if you're killing negative thoughts or killing judgment by exposing it, then that is a mystical process.
Absolutely.
So, for example, if I'm able to say, you're judging this person or you're judging this situation right now, and really take a hard look at what that experience is. That experience in and of itself isn't mystical, but me taking a look at it is. Mm-hmm. And therefore it's pointing me away from that, because that's a limiting state of consciousness. That's a limiting place to be, both for myself or for that person that I'm judging or that situation that I'm judging. I'm creating a box, and boxes are dark on the inside, and I'm right in the middle.
Yeah, bro. Well said. Absolutely. Yeah, so it's best to not fully define it or limit it, but I go back and forth with it sometimes, because sometimes I feel like I need to, just, to step outside of the critiquing aspect of it, but just to say, that mode of consciousness itself, sometimes I can judge even myself to say, hey, I'm too riled up, I'm too angry, and is it more spiritual to, I often contemplate, is it more spiritual to ride out that emotion and really just feel the presence of the anger, or is it more spiritual to see beyond the anger and quell that and subdue that within yourself and transcend that and transmute that, or whatever word you want to use, and go beyond it and become peaceful again? Because sometimes there's a reason why you're angry, and there's a reason to be angry, and working out whatever's underlying that might be of value. But then I feel like they're on some level getting lost in that anger passionately is inherently unspiritual.
I think ultimately it leads us to the same place, and being able to see it that way is mystical. So anger doesn't last. Judgment doesn't last. Eventually you're going to be separated from that person or that situation that you're angry about, or that you're judgmental about, or that you're sad about, or whatever the emotion or thought pattern is. Eventually you're going to be out of that, and to take it back to memory, this is kind of where hindsight becomes 2020 and becomes mystical, because if you're able to not just move past it, but look back and be like, well, I really fucked up right there.
Yeah.
Then what is the thing that fucked up? Was it you? Was it
you giving into the emotion of
the emotion, the thought? Yeah. What was it that fucked up? And ultimately it's nothing, because it doesn't exist anymore.
It's just a judgment within a memory. And so in a sense, that awareness in itself is therapeutically healing you, allowing you to transcend even believing that as a fixed thing.
Yes.
And maybe there's a chance then with that recognition that in the future as we function, we're not even fixed in the state that we're experiencing in the moment. So we have an easier ability then to say, wait a second, if I was imagining this in the future, I would laugh at this. And so it's almost like gives you that little bit of space to be able to kind of turn on and off when you allow yourself to dive into those emotions and when you allow yourself to identify or attach to a state of thinking or feeling.
Yes. I've got 2 young kids and they cry a lot. They get upset a lot. So what's the thing that makes them not that way anymore? Is it them? Or is it the situation? Something in the environment has changed? Or is it just a natural process? And I think it's the latter. I think it's just a natural process of...
We just slowly detach. Over time, we get clarity, and we're not emotionally entangled with things in the same way. It's just life, the wisdom of time or experience. Or maybe there's some even more intuitive subconscious thing. Or maybe it has to do with brain chemistry and hormones or something, but you reach these certain plateaus where you're just like, this would have destroyed me 10 years ago, and now I'm just unfazed in this situation.
Right. Imagine being a baby and never stopping crying until you die.
Oh my gosh. I think a lot of people feel like that's how they're living their lives, even though it's not true at all, because our inner dialogue, and the inner monologue can, even when you're not there, you're kind of tipping your toe in there all the time with the paranoia and the melancholy and stuff. And I think that's a lot of what spirituality is about. It's not about whitewashing away your emotions and saying it's not spiritual to experience these things, but instead it's more just about realizing what that process is doing when we allow ourselves to go into that state and valuing clarity more and peace more. And it just slowly, your whole soul just shifts to alignment with that peaceful state. Just naturally, because we are like, I'm tired of poisoning myself by letting myself even feel sad about something or feel mad about something or whatever it is. It's like, maybe I'm justified in feeling that in the moment, but do I even want to feel that? Is it even worth it to care? And that's the wisdom of detachment blossoming over time of the spirit with the spiritual practitioner, it seems like.
So would you say that valuing the present is mystical?
Absolutely. I think that's the only portal to the mystic is the present, and so it's like if you don't value presence and becoming more present, you have no way of attuning to the mystic, right? So in a weird way, any single thing that makes you more present is spiritual, to tie it back to where we were earlier, where that's why basketball is spiritual, because it's about centering and finding presence with your full body consciousness. And so I do feel like that's the level where anything can become spiritual, and it's the being present in the moment applied to anything that makes it spiritual. Or in some culture they'd call that tantra, where tantra is not just sex. Tantra is the act of ceremonializing or turning something into a spiritual act that was once considered mundane. And what's the bridge? You could build elaborate ceremonies around everything you do to make them spiritual, but I think the real essence of it is what you're saying, and it's just being present in the moment makes anything spiritual. And so there's kind of 2 categories of things. There's the things that already do that and are already making you more present. Like playing guitar, you have to be aware of both hands And even just like tuning a guitar, it's kind of a similar principle. You're like tuning yourself. You're like kind of bringing yourself in and out of awareness with the present moment, just as the guitar is going in and out of tune, which is its present vibratory state when you get there. I don't know if I conveyed that properly, but it's a very spiritual thing, and it forces you to be in the present moment. Now, I bet you there's a million things in creation that naturally bring you to the present moment. I mean, I imagine childbirth is one of the most difficult, intense things in the world, but you probably are present as fuck. There's probably some mystical, spiritual, underlying, universal thing that has to happen for every mother going through that process, because you're so fucking present. Like, I can't speak on it. I've never done it in this life, but it's like, it seems like it's inherently spiritual.
As a witness to that process, I'll speak for my wife and say yes.
I mean, so, yeah, it's not to put labels on it, but that's just to put a wide variety of examples on the table here.
Yeah.
But in another category of thing, there's things that you can use to make you more present, and that can be spiritual, but also you can use to distract yourself from the moment and can be less spiritual. Like, I feel like sex is a great example, where some people it's a very spiritual thing, and some people it's an escape.
Right.
And even something like drinking can actually become the spiritual practice, but for most people it's the escape.
Right.
Any fucking thing can be the practice, but it's really just about how are you using it. Are you using it to tune into the present moment, like you're saying, or are you just using it for an ulterior motive, like to subdue an emotion or to go have fun or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, like, that is what makes something spiritual. All of a sudden, it's how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
And so really it comes down to the individual, because we could all be on the same basketball court and one person is in their ego competing and another person is like using this to be present and have these out of body experiences where they're in a mystical, magical moment, and it's all God's right there on the court.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's up to us and how we choose to use each thing and relate within each thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I hate to say it, but in saying that, it like kind of proves that this podcast is an impossible task, because it's really like how we relate to it defines its mysticism almost more than the thing unto itself.
Absolutely.
Even an inherently spiritual movie or song or meditation program isn't inherently spiritual if we're not relating to it from that place.
Mm-hmm.
And it could actually be pushing us further away from spirituality. That's why I feel like the culture of spirituality in America and maybe around the whole world has kind of degraded to where it has, because it's like it's become about the thing and not the state behind the thing.
Yes.
And there's no way to really guarantee that with any system or any group of people, that everyone's going to be focused on actually using the practice or the situation to their benefit, versus even if they don't even know it sometimes, that they're using it to boost their ego or to get laid or to, run away from their mommy or daddy issues or who knows what, anything, everything.
Yep.
And perhaps maybe it's always a combination of the two for every person in different degrees until you're enlightened, mm-hmm. where you're always kind of coming to everything with ulterior motives, but there's also the room to come to it with the spiritual intention and the presence and the clarity. Mm-hmm. Where that line lies, I feel like, is very malleable, and that's why it's worth just continuing the discussion and just really focusing on a bunch of great examples of where people have fully locked into that, and maybe also critiquing some other examples where people might be off course in my or our or your opinion or whatever, not to dwell on that, but it's like it's a part of the conversation, kind of needs to be had, but it almost is more spiritual inherently to just focus on who's got it right and what's going right, as opposed to just sitting here like so many people in the world and just being like, everything's a critique and living off of the critique.
Yeah. I think you setting up this podcast is an incredibly unique situation, because you're giving room for those that have proven it to be a valid process to be validated, and those that are going through the process, like you and I are, to also be validated in that they're going through it, that it's not just some, other typical normal human instinctual stuff, animalistic stuff, that
there's something worth pursuing here.
There's something worth pursuing. Thank you. Because I was losing it.
No, I'm right there with you, man. Yeah. I mean, not that we have the answers, but hopefully this helps spotlight those beings that maybe do have some sense of clarity of approach. And maybe, hopefully each person who witnesses this will take a different gem and a different nugget from each different tradition, each different anecdote, each different example, each different guest, each different episode, and create their own sense of approach and their own sense of clarity of this is what works for me, this is what I resonate with, and are not trying to carbon copy, if I'm like the Mystic Americana thing, then I'm on the right vibe, but it's not even that simple. It really comes down to what works for you. And, basketball might be hell on earth, and I've just been rambling about it for no reason.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like heaven, and it's just, I hope that people can find examples where they wouldn't look at something as spiritual and start to even just investigate within their own conscious mind how they could have a spiritual relationship with the things that are already in their lives, even without saying, I need to start watching these movies and playing basketball instead of baseball or whatever, whatever it is. It's like, that's not the point. The point is finding that approach within your own heart and mind in a way that you can then lock in and maximize the spiritual benefit of whatever it is that enters your life and dominates your days, because everybody's got something going on.
Yes.
And I really do think every path can be a path to the divine if it's oriented properly.
I think so too.
It's pretty outlandish and bold of me to say, but at the same time, it's like, come on, people. There's no way that everyone's wrong. Everyone walks around thinking that they're right already for a reason. Maybe we all are right to our own degrees in our own ways, and we just need to
come together and put it all together and just be right together.
Exactly, bro. That's what I'm feeling these days. That seems to be the truth in my heart, which has led us to this table. I don't know. That seems like a natural, conclusive sort of topic, unless you have any other examples that are on your heart or mind you want to dig into, or we could save them for a future episode. I'd love to have you back as many times as you want to be back in the sense.
Thank you.
I don't even know if you're a guest or a co-host right now, but I'm loving talking to you, bro. This has been great.
Thank you. Not particularly, but one little thing that I just want to go back to is that we are very lucky to live in a place where we can have discussions like this.
Absolutely.
And there may be people that view this episode from other places in the world that are not living in a place that is as free and accepting as we are. And I would just encourage everyone to use what's available to you. And because it's all hidden within the present moment.
Well said, bro. Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate you tying it back like that. We are very privileged, and I often take it for granted that I get to just live a mystical, spiritual, little fairy tale life, and it's like the world is in such a state of suffering that, if anybody can just derive any nugget of a sense of owning their own joy and freedom in their present moment, and that little spark of spirituality that they can tap into from us being fortunate enough to just kind of drown in a sea of bliss and light all the time and live these glorious lives. I mean, I'm so grateful for the life I live, and I hope that everyone, finds their own way of tapping into the inner peace and bliss. I mean, obviously, I think it's hard to really fully get there without meditation and daily meditation at that. I
would agree with that.
But I don't think we can really even prescribe it as literally as in order for the world to achieve peace, every single person has to meditate every single day.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm trying to investigate it further, because that works for me. I can sit and meditate every day and know I'm going to tap into a wellspring of peace. I'm going to have a moment of joy at least, if not be soaring in bliss for the rest of the day, who knows, from this experience. But at the same time, if that doesn't work for everyone, or they're not ready to necessarily, maybe not, I don't know if not ready is the right term, but not every disposition of mind and person is even meant to sit still and meditate, perhaps. I don't know. And maybe there's some version of the world where we can only know peace if certain people stop meditating and were to live more joyful, present, clear lives in the Zen sense of like the inaction within the action of it all. And finding their modalities of relating to their spirituality where they cannot feel repressed and then having people lashing out of anger and greed and creating an imbalanced world, but instead, you know, find their way to their balance and their inner spiritual state. So in a weird way, I feel like even just monitoring your thoughts is like a prayer. Even if you can't meditate, just being mindful of the stream of thoughts that are moving through you is knowing, hey, what signal am I putting out to the divine? And it can be intentional where you stop your inner dialogue and you like say a clear statement. I'm praying this, dear Lord, scoobity boobity, you know, whatever it is. But it's like, I think it can also be as subtle as like just watching your thoughts and just keeping track of where your thoughts are going. That's a meditation, that's a prayer, that's a mantra in a sense of each of those phrases as well.
I really like how you phrase that.
Well, I appreciate it. I mean, I hope that we can come to more concrete examples to help people to be empowered to tap into that state. But I think behind everything, that's all it really is. That's what the spiritual experience is. Whether you're doing a puja or you're shoveling shit, you know, it's like, how aware are you of your stream of thoughts and your state of being? So hopefully we can have another discussion again soon and go dive into a plethora of amazing living spiritual masters and great prophets and spiritual masters that have come and gone that have great insights to provide to us, and, you know, beacons within our culture of other, you know, non-spiritual teacher beings that are also mystic giants in our hearts and minds. And then maybe people will enjoy hearing about it too. I don't know. If anyone's still here listening, I appreciate you coming along for the ride. And Adam, thank you so much for your time, brother.
Thank you for your time and for having me on for your very first episode of this thing.
Wow, dude. Well, it will not be the last with you, at least.
Cool.
Grateful for you, bro.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Me too.
Formal handshake.
Formal handshake.
Peace, y'all.
Thank you.